Go.
How, if at all, do you think Zeus would rewrite the end of the birds, and why? In search of a topon apragmona. When first introduced to Pasityrus and Elelpides in Aristophanes Birds, we meet two fiercely independent youths on a mission. Their goal is to establish a political space that offers repose from the aspects of Athenian democracy that most interfere with daily life. With city founding implements in hand, Elelpides explains, "That's why we're trekking this trek, and wandering with basket, kettle, and myrtle boughs in search of a peaceful place," the topon apragmona. At this early point in the play, these lines provide invaluable insight into the protagonist's agenda, since they themselves have already identified their intentions with the apragmon cause. As L.B. Carter argues in Chapter 1 of his book, The Quiet Athenian, pragmosune, quietism, or minding one's own business, represented a significant counter-movement that challenged Greek cultural norms of striving toward fame and honor. Carter even identifies our main characters with a particular subgroup within the apragmon counterculture, the rustic auturgos, a wholesome, independent peasant who works his own land. And as the play progresses, the two virtuous farmers cast their lot with the birds and get carried away from their roots and established objectives.
Sorry. I apologize. Goodness me. Sorry.
Okay. I'm actually having a bit of problems getting this right.
Mm.
I'm going to move back again. Can you just do the last sentence when I'm set up?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, let's get this right. Okay, I'm going to start you. Hang on.
As the play progresses, the two virtuous farmers cast their lot with the birds and get carried away from their roots and established objectives. One scholar, William Arrowsmith, notes the internal changes within the protagonists. Confronted by the hostility of the birds to man, Pasityrus ingeniously conceives of the idea of Cloud Cuckoo Land, and from this point on, totally forgetting his quest for apragmosune, he becomes the open and skillful exponent of polypragmosune, persuasive, ingenious, cunning, meddlesome, and imperialistic. The apragmon cause had many factors working against it, and it may have been difficult for the characters to maintain their drive for the topon apragmona. Arrowsmith suggests that the change is merely acquiescence to the greater Greek culture, saying, once arrived among the birds, Pasityrus promptly exhibits the national quality from which he is trying to escape. Aside from native cultural pressures, divine intervention lures Pasityrus to polypragmosune. Prometheus sets the protagonist after a very beautiful maiden who has custody of Zeus' thunderbolt and everything else as well. Good counsel, law and order, common decency, shipyards, mudslinging, paymasters, and 3 obol fees. Of course, Pasityrus eloquently negotiates this goal to fruition, yet it is important to contrast his original intentions against his newly found goals in order to track his internal change. The maiden represents administrative authority, both in general policy and in organization of details. And once again, the joke is that the details are the same kinds as in Athens: ships, slander, and pay for jurors. It is not unreasonable to believe that these factors would have influenced the trajectory of the character's proposed agenda at the outset of the play. However, the internal transformation presented within the play displays a complete about-face from the peace-loving peasant farmer to the imperialist tyrant. My project offers an alternate ending to Aristophanes Birds that brings the transformation full circle, returning Pasityrus to his former roots and original intentions, pragmosune, the contented leisure of traditional order and the rural conservatism of peaceful life. Since my project offers a vision of the aftermath in the wake of Pasityrus' rise to power in Aristophanes' Birds, I've drawn upon a variety of relevant texts in order to create an amalgamated dialogue. I have borrowed primarily from Homer's Iliad, Hesiod's Theogony, and fragments of Aristophanes' Islands. In my first scene, Ex Agoras, The opening scene focuses on Pasityrus' realization of his internal transformation and his subsequent attempt to reclaim his former identity and values. Enthroned as tyrant and elevated to godhood, he rules from the apex of Cloud Cuckoo Land, and after his epiphany, he begins his frantic descent to the city gates. Although national character fueled his polyprogmon drive into the Agora, Pasityrus' inherent outrogos nature is entirely inappropriate to the political space he has come to inhabit. Carter explains, politically, it is the deme and the phratry rather than the assembly in Athens which are significant in his life. The city in all its aspects is something to be escaped from at the earliest opportunity. To be fair, Pasityrus and Elelpides did begin their journey with the intention to create political space, and not simply to evade it at all costs, but it is important to note that the Agora sits low on the peasant farmers' lists of priorities. Aristotle gives insight into how the Aprogmon rustic encounters the Agora when necessary. He writes, whenever the class of farmers and those of a moderate substance is sovereign in the state, they govern according to traditional laws, for they have a livelihood if they work, and so cannot be at leisure. So they preserve the traditional laws and have meetings in the assembly only when necessary. Not only do more intimate political alliances distance the outrogos from the Agora, but Aristotle suggests that the money economy associated with the assembly and marketplace are equally inappropriate to the subsistent aprogmon. Monetary, familial, and religious ties to the land set the peasant farmer at odds with the political space of the Agora. Nevertheless, Pasityrus' rule incorporates another element common to the outrogos, individual liberty, especially regarding property. In regards to individualism presented through Homeric epic, Carter comments, the Homeric hero acquired fame and honor solely on his own account. He heaped up treasure as a mark of his standing. He was virtually a lawless figure, answerable only to himself, tyrant in his own domain. The aprogmon farmer serves as a parallel to the lawless hero, and that his nature is inappropriate to the legal center, agora, and depends upon his ability to build up material possessions. And although the peasant desires repose from frenetic litigation, the protagonist comes to request both Zeus's source of legal authority and pay for jurors. In the course of the birds, the autorgoi become less and less like the jurophobes they originally claimed to be in line 110. My selection of Homeric epic was chosen to highlight these incompatibilities between the aprogmon individual and the agora. Pasityrus mirrors the Homeric hero in his strive for fame, honor, and acquisition of material possessions, but his execution places him within a realm that is completely inappropriate to his truer nature. The protagonist is independent of the law, money economy, and agora-based politics. Zeus's appeal in the language of Homeric epic, granting him heroic return, entices his affinity for individualism while returning him to a life of enforcing traditional norms, one in which he will not be able to subvert Olympian father rule. The simple life. The fragment from Aristophanes' Islands is a perfect example of his idealized view of country life. It recalls Pasityrus to the life of a peasant farmer, aprogmon outrogos, and grants him refuge from the polis. Mind and soul. Hesiod's theogony proved to be the greatest help in answering the question, how, if at all, do you think Zeus would rewrite the end of the birds, and why? Because it revolves around Zeus's supremacy and provides insight into his character. In particular, the sacrifice of Mecone myth appeared the most relevant since both stories feature metis-endowed man challenging traditional boundaries, hierarchies, and distribution of goods, and most importantly, they present Zeus's reaction to them. Hesiod presents a dual-natured poikilos god who relies heavily on kairos, the opportune moment, and foresight to preserve his rule. Dios naos, the mind of Zeus, is used to convey the imagery of a distant king enthroned upon Olympus, an objective, dispassionate judge who enforces the rigid boundaries of natural law. Just as Prometheus attempts to deceive the mind of Zeus, so Pasityrus begins his assault by mimicking this aspect of the father of men and gods. Once he has set himself to constructing the city, he instructs the birds encircle the whole atmosphere, all of the area between the earth and sky, with a wall of baked bricks, like Babylon. By his very nos alone, Zeus matches, if he does not exceed, this attempt on his supremacy. In form, the nos of Zeus can be thought to circumscribe the entirety of existence and enforce the rigid boundaries of his hierarchy. Hesiod explains, thus it is not possible in any way at all to avoid the mind of Zeus. Either the scope of the god's perception is so great that nothing lies beyond its grasp, or its perceptive capabilities are superior to all others, rendering them unable to evade detection should the naos choose to notice them. Or both cases may stand simultaneously. While this passage only affirms a passive coexistence of Zeus's mind with divine and human activity, in the Theogony the poet shows that it has an active nature and goals within reach. He says, the mind of great Zeus achieved its end. J.R. Warden argues that Zeus's mind always achieves its end, or telos, and that distinguishes it from the naos of man. Dios naos actively invests itself in the human sphere by setting all-encompassing ends, and its superior nature serves as a distinguishing trait between men and gods. Another line from the Theogony says, so it is not possible to cheat the mind of Zeus, nor to go beyond it. Zeus's mind delineates the boundaries that cannot be transgressed, and it preserves a hierarchy by distinguishing gods from men, who possess the inferior of the two minds, and men from beasts, who completely lack a naos. In addition to extending through space, Dios naos spans time and lets Zeus see and comprehend the pattern of events, past, present, and future. Naos's form counts for divine omnipresence. At first glance, Naos appears to guarantee the Olympian father's supremacy by its sheer scope and comparatively superior strength, but its dual metis-endowed nature, when working in conjunction with thumos, heart, that ensures it achieves its end. The model of the circle, as described by Vernon and Detienne, provides a visual of the complementary relationship shared between naos and thumos. As previously argued, Dios naos forms an all-encompassing boundary that provides a rigid structure for enforcing natural law, and thus it can be envisioned as the circumference of the circle, while thumos pervades the center, just as it does in the structure of the sacrifice at Mekone Tail. Vernon and Detienne claim that the curve embodies the essential feature of metis, pliability and polymorphism, duplicity and equivocality, inversion and reversal, since it stands in opposition to what is straight, direct, and unequivocal. However, the relationship between the two components of Zeus' mental faculties proves that the two can be reconciled. The naos stands for all that is rigid in its boundaries and unequivocal in its capacity to perceive and know unequivocal truth. Thumos enjoys a wide range of meaning and function. At times it can be active, often deliberating and processing the perceived information for the naos. Prometheus illustrates an example of this usage in saying, choose whichever of these portions your heart within you bids, and at another time the thumos functions as a sensory organ, perceiving emotional information, and anger came to him in his heart. Harrison also noted this ambiguity, stating, in discussing Freyne and thumos, clear definitions between emotional and rational activity tend to be lacking. Although naos does not have the same ambiguity of function, in form it can be likened to the circle, the bond that is perfect because it completely turns back on itself, is closed in on itself with neither beginning nor end, front nor rear, and which becomes both mobile and immobile, moving in both directions at once. Both spatial and temporal aspects of naos can be incorporated into this model, since they form boundaries and yet perceive limitless space and perceive all eternity. In the Works and the Days, even Hesiod himself admits the apparent contradiction of an inscrutable naos, and at one time the mind of Zeus is one way, another at another, and it is hard for mortal men to perceive it. The lines between rational and irrational are blurred together. Zeus is able to bring discordant qualities into harmony with one another, and he is constantly shifting and adapting his multivarigated features in order to outwit those who would attempt to challenge his reign. In order to supply a valid answer to how Zeus would go about reordering the world to his will, I had to understand his character and methods, and a careful analysis of the works of Hesiod gave me some idea. In the case of Pasityrus, the Olympian father allows his wishes to come true while taking his internal transformation into account. Through foresight, he knows to wait for the moment his adversary begs to return to the progmal life he once knew, and then enacts the Daulos, reversal. Costume. Pasityrus wears a traditional white chiton and has tiny white wings. The goal is to make him seem more angelic and less avian in order to emphasize the irony of his rebellion against the gods. Angels are the loyal servants of God who by their very existence proclaim the greatness of another being and preserve a structured hierarchy. The main character's intentional resemblance to those beings generates comedic irony and underscores the fact that he has decided to contend with the Olympian father of men and gods by challenging his authority and hierarchy. The small size of the wings is meant to be comedic. The tarnished crown and scepter from where the wild things are serve as props to symbolize Pasityrus' role as a fallen king within my reimagined ending, suggested in shot 1, as he seeks refuge from the agora to the sound of an angry avian chorus. This setting. Cloud Cuckoo Land hovers parallel to the earth and is identical to the area of the Athenian polis. This interpretation is inspired by the idea that gods inhabiting the heavens seem to be coordinated with the lands over which they reside, as seen by the introduction of a barbarian god. Pasityrus asks, "So, there are some other gods, barbarians, up country from you?" And Prometheus answers, "Why shouldn't we have barbarians?" Although city walls enclose the polis, in my imagination they do not extend downwards to the earth, below, nor act as supports in any way. A city that defies gravity adds an element of fantasy and emphasizes the capacity of metis to perform reversal. Shot 1, ex agoras. The setting is, the scene takes place in the agora of Cloud Cuckoo Land. There is bright sunlight. The sound of angry birds squawking and chirping comes from the agora. Should I play that now? Alright.
You can read on top of that.
Okay.
Sound. Go ahead.
The picture fades in as a static camera establishes Pasityrus at the top of a path leading out of the agora. He runs straight downhill and out of the frame as he loses his crown and scepter. The camera remains on the path for 10 seconds after Pasityrus leaves the frame, before cutting to the next shot. This is a diagram of shot 1's motion. The estimated distance from beginning to end is 30 yards. The estimated time of this shot is 45 seconds. Shot 2. The scene takes place along the city walls of Cloud Cuckoo Land. There is bright sunlight contrasted against areas of shade supplied by the niches in the wall. The bird noises gradually get quieter to convey a distance from the agora to the city walls. The scene opens with a cut to Pasityrus wandering along with the course of the city walls while constantly looking back over his shoulder to see if any birds had followed him.